one of the things I think a lot of people trip on while they're breaking down their religious indoctrination. How can a God be good and yet still be responsible for such terrible things? And how could you worship that God then, knowing that?
And I think people should ask those questions.
Agreed.
Perhaps I could use this as an excuse to go to those far-off planets with little polka-dotted people if necessary, and be able to talk about love, war, nature, God, sex, all those things that go to make up the excitement of the human condition.
I'm Captain James Kirk.
Spock.
Your move, Captain.
Jim Kirk of the Enterprise.
What's going on? I'm James Kirk. These people are my friend and my shipmate. Leave my crew alone.
Out of the question.
How about that?
James Kirk.
It fits like a glove, Captain.
Oh, the bonehead ideas.
Gentlemen, I'm Captain James Kirk. Get out of my chair. Get out of it now.
My greetings and felicitations, Captain. So good of you and your officers to, drop in. Absolutely smashing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Humanist Trek. It's a Star Trek podcast about the humanism in Star Trek. I'm Sarah Ray.
And I'm Allie Ashmead.
And, I wanted to have a conversation. I wanted to say something. We can cut this if it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about something that I noticed, something that I did that I want to apologize for, but also, like, I don't want it to be performative, but also I think it would be helpful for other people to hear this whole thing. So here's what happened.
Okay.
I went back and I edited our interview with Rod. And then I went back and I transcribed our interview with Rod. And I listened back to QA the episodes and all of that stuff. So I've listened to this several times. And I did something that I don't like, and now I can't unhear it. When we were talking to Rod about the racism that McCoy and Kirk were showing to Spock, I talked all over you.
Oh, me? Oh.
You were trying to get some words in edgewise, and I just kept stepping on you. And not only that, I felt like I centered my own realization of the racism against Spock. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying. And maybe I didn't notice it because I know when we're on these podcasts, we both have stuff to say and it comes to us and it's just like, oh, I want to get it out. So I get it. I didn't notice it. But then again, I don't get to listen to the
right. The raw audio.
Editing.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you're saying and I accept your apology. I appreciate you noticing it because a lot of people might do that and not even notice that they've done it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I'm thankful for that listening back process because I'm sure that kind of shit happens all the time. And I don't notice it in the moment. Right. But when you can go back and listen back and go, oh, God, I did that. That was not great. Like, oh, wow. I think that's helpful for being able to then notice it in the moment better.
Yeah. And
Maybe.
Again, we both like interrupt each other. Sometimes we're not in the same room. And even when we are, we both we get so excited and want to get our thought out because we just thought of something and we're like, oh, what about this? And it happens.
Yeah.
That too. So
yeah, that was just something that I noticed when I went back to do all of that editing. None of us are perfect. Yeah.
And I appreciate you noticing that. And, we all can do some work on ourselves.
Right.
So.
Right. We're all trying to grow and get better.
Yeah.
Also, we should talk about the American Humanist Association's conference is next weekend, May 4th through the 7th, right here in Denver.
Woohoo, Denver. Easy.
And we're going to have so much fun together. This will be our first time working the table together.
I know. We're just it's going to be stupid. we're going to have a blast.
Yeah, we are. I just got in and inventoried a crap ton of new merch to take with us. So the stuff that I ordered that didn't come ahead of the American Atheist Convention came in. So now we have all 3 different designs of the t-shirt in a couple of different sizes and colors. And we've got the whole range of stuff. We got notebooks and coffee mugs and all kinds of shit.
I'm going to finally get myself a fucking notebook. Because those things are cool.
They are. If you're going to be in the area, if you can be in the area, I don't know at the time of posting here whether or not tickets are still available. My assumption is that they are. So go to the American Humanist Association's website. It's americanhumanist.org and click on the conference thing. And please come visit us. We'd love to see you guys there.
They better be, because I have not. Don't kill me. I'm not registered. I'm going to do it today. I promise.
Allie.
I know. Look, procrastination is my middle name.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have so much fun. Well, I hope you've all been studying your Greco-Roman mythology. It's Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, Episode 2, Who Mourns for Adonias?
Sir, contact with an object. It's moving toward us. No visual contact yet.
Deflectors, full intensity.
Mr. Sulu, yes, Captain. Anything on your scanners?
It's coming at light speed.
Collision course. Visual contact.
Anything, over?
All wavelengths dominated by ionization effects, sir.
All engines full stop.
We start out this episode with a bit of detail on the Beta Geminorum system. Strange lack of intelligent life on any of the planets. Like, are they saying that every star system in the universe should have produced intelligent life? They're like, oh, look here, here's a whole system full of planets, and oddly, there's no intelligent life on any of them.
Well, this particular one, they're talking about Pollux 5, and I think they said they knew of some people or groups of people that went there, and they should be, I don't know, or maybe I'm getting another episode mixed up.
We don't dwell on that very long because Scotty is chatting up Lieutenant Carolyn Palamas.
Yes.
He's inviting her to coffee after an all-nighter working on this report she had to turn in.
And of course, you know what's coming. Kirk and McCoy are going to tease him about it.
As if he's not standing right there.
Right, but he doesn't care, and he just leaves with the pretty lieutenant, and he's like, fuck you guys.
Kirk and McCoy have a whole ass conversation about them.
Yeah.
Right there.
I didn't appreciate that.
McCoy's like, I don't need a medical scan to tell that Scotty's blood is all rushed to one of his heads.
Yeah, that's just typical guy ribbing.
Yeah. Well, there's some pretty sexist stuff here too, but like, again, a reminder of the times, but like McCoy talks about how, one of these days she'll find the right man and leave the service because a married woman working was unthinkable at the time, right?
Yeah.
But
I appreciate the fact that Kirk comes in and says, yeah, I guess I'll be losing I'll really be losing an officer. So I appreciate the fact that he kind of realized her significance as an officer, not just as a woman.
Yes.
But yeah, of course it came from McCoy though.
Of course.
He's so my favorite person.
Anyway, they're about to do some cartography on Pollux 4, which Spock reports as lifeless and quite ordinary, when the writer's mushroom trip hit hard because here on the view screen is a giant floating glowing green hand.
Chekhov is like, am I seeing things? Yeah, it's the penis envy mushrooms that you just did.
This was the worst, the absolute worst looking thing.
Totally. And this is when I thought this episode's going to be ridiculous.
Sulu tries to maneuver away from the hand, but it's no use. And before long, the hand grabs the saucer of the Enterprise and everybody on the bridge does a jerk. Sulu announces that Helm isn't responding. They can't move. After the theme, Kirk has Sulu try the old stuck in the mud routine. Hard forward, slipping into reverse, back and forth.
Rock the ship, get out of the mud or get out of the snow. Yeah,
but it's no use. Spock reports that while it looks like a human appendage, it is simply an energy field of some kind holding the ship. Next, Kirk has Sulu try to switch the tractor beams to repulse and try to push them away, but there's nothing there to push against. Spock's got something unusual on one of the scanners, and he puts it on the main viewer. There on the view screen appears a semi-transparent human head wearing a laurel wreath. And our floating head friend,
Mecca lecca hi, Mecca hiney ho,
welcomes his children. And there's a lot of like old-timey talk, of course. John B. says shit like, you have left your plains and valleys and made this bold venture, so it was in the beginning.
They always make it sound like you're watching like the 10th Commandment,
Yes.
that movie with Charlton Heston.
Yes.
I mean, it was very biblical, like the eons have passed and what has been written has come about and all this bullshit and you're my children and welcome. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. John B. confirms that he was the one that stopped the Enterprise. And when Kirk demands it be released, he says, "It's been 5,000 years and you people still haven't learned patience." Kirk tosses off some threats, but John B. isn't having it and says, "You will obey me, lest I close my hand thus." And the Enterprise starts registering extreme pressure on the hull.
You're like, wait, we're just kidding.
We get a cutaway to that ridiculous hand holding onto the ship. Honestly, why did this have to be the first episode we record today? I'm high, but I'm not nearly high enough for this stupid fucking hand. Anyway, everybody starts reacting to the increased pressure until finally Kirk gives in and John B. is like, "That was lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is a bit racist. I'd like to invite you and your officers to join me, but not that pointy-eared one. He's too fucking negative and he really brings the room down, you know? You guys get me?"
Yeah, he's like, he reminds me of Pan, which is another figure in history or mythology, and he always found Pan boring.
Yeah. And I am very much not up on my Greek mythology.
I'm not either. I can, like, the names like Aphrodite and
I recognize some
all
of
that
them.
stuff.
Right.
But I wasn't up on the Mercury, who's the god of war, the god of love, all that stuff.
Yeah, right.
No.
He's like, earlier he said, "You're like your fathers, Agamemnon, Hector, Odysseus." I don't know any of these people. Kirk sees this as a potentially helpful decision, though, with Spock on the ship doing research and himself on the planet getting firsthand intel. They should be able to figure this week's puzzle out fairly easily.
Yes. They'll probably figure it out quicker because Spock is on the ship.
Exactly.
And running things.
Kirk, McCoy, Scotty, Chekhov, and Lieutenant Carolyn Palamas materialize in a clearing. And it's at this moment Carolyn chooses to question why she's on the away team.
Right. She's like, "I don't even know why I'm here." And then, of course, McCoy's got to remind her, well, you're trained in archaeology and anthropology and ancient civilizations. And he called it the A&A officer, which is, I guess that's a thing. And so that field is likely to be some use on this particular mission because this guy's referencing all these gods from Earth's history. So she better
you're the expert here.
Right.
They walk forward into what looks like a temple, lots of columns, and sitting in this little temple is Apollo, and he monologues about having once outstretched his glowing green semi-transparent hand and made Earth tremble, breathed upon it, and spring returned.
Let's talk about his dress. I like it.
Let's talk about his dress.
I like it. I mean, okay, so he's scantily clad in it's kind of like a off-the-shoulder tunic, but it's gold. And he's got gold sandals strapped all the way up his ankles. Why do I know so much detail? Because
Because you were zooming in.
Yeah. I was pausing and rewinding.
It just reminds me, and I know we've said this a few times already in the season and a half that we've gone through. It really just seems like every other week they run down to wardrobe and are like, "What do y'all got now? Lots of Roman and Greek things. Okay, that'll work."
Doing.
Yeah.
Let's make it work.
Great line for Chekhov here, as Apollo announces himself as such, and Chekhov quips, "And I'm the Tsar of all the Russias."
Yes.
And when Kirk scolds him, he says, "Sorry, Captain, I've never met a god before."
Kirk says he's not a god.
Yeah, he's no god. McCoy's scans indicate that this is a simple humanoid, but obviously not so simple given his powers. And it was at this point that I closed my laptop, made some pizza rolls, and texted you saying, "I have never been disinterested in a Star Trek episode ever." Yes.
Yep.
This was my moment.
But then at this point, Apollo turns to Carolyn. He's like, "Oh, a woman." So now he's focusing on her. But he's also starting to talk about Earth, and Earth has the most beautiful women in the galaxy or whatever. And
I don't know, man. Have you seen the Orion girls? Just saying.
Yeah, girl. He says he knew Zeus and Aphrodite 5,000 years ago on Earth. finally, Kirk's like, okay, fine, we're here. What do you want? And then Apollo's like, well, you're basically not going to leave this place. Transporters are down. The communications aren't functioning anymore. And he wants them to worship him as their forefathers did on Earth. And Kirk's like, fuck you, buddy. No, I don't think so. Apollo suddenly grows to 10 feet tall.
Gigantic height.
Yes. And he looks down on the crew and he's like, welcome to Olympus.
This was a great shot. The way that they used like the Apollo,
camera.
Apollo's point of view to show that raising up of the camera as it looked down on the crew. That was a great shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
After the hand and floaty face, I was expecting this to be more cheesy.
Honestly, I was too. That's why I was like, initially, I didn't like this episode, but I actually ended up loving it.
Same. Back from commercial, and that stupid hand still has a hold of the Enterprise. On the bridge, Uhura is trying to call the away team with no luck. Spock is firing off orders. He wants to know what's going on down there. Back on the planet, giant Apollo fades out. If you, like me, forgot to study for your final exam on Greek mythology, don't fret. Luckily, we've brought our expert along. The purpose for her character, Palamas explains that Apollo is the twin brother of Artemis, son of the god Zeus and Leto, immortal. He was the god of light and purity. He was skilled in the bow and lyre.
And Chekhov is like, whatever he is, he controls some pretty remarkable tech.
Mm-hmm. Their scientific skepticism remains pretty solid. You know, Scotty remarks like, that's an incredible power, which means that there, should be some serious power source around here somewhere. And off they go, tricordering around to try to find the power source. Kirk and McCoy step away so that Kirk can pitch his hypothesis. Maybe he really is Apollo. And without completing all the thoughts, Kirk starts to suggest that whatever this life form is, maybe 5,000 years ago, it visited Earth and really was Apollo.
But he's like, maybe they're not really gods, though.
Right.
But because of the primitiveness of the people 5,000 years ago, maybe they were actually aliens.
Yeah.
Because with these primitive people, anything would look like magic,
Yeah.
And so I thought this was really cool.
This was
really
when I got hooked.
I was like, yes.
Yeah, it almost lost me. And then we got here and I was like, oh, and not only that, the conversation that we just had with Rod, he mentions something about like, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any gods. If there is a God, maybe it was an alien that, was visiting from a far off planet and we thought it was God. Like
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think you watch this show, but I'm also a fan of Stargate. And that whole thing, that was the whole premise of that show, was the fact that, and it was Egyptian gods in that show.
Okay.
But it was the whole premise was that these aliens came to ancient Egypt, and because they were aliens and had all this tech, they became gods, and they wanted these people to worship them.
Yeah.
So that's, but literally that is also, if you watch the silly show Ancient Aliens, but that's literally like the thing that makes more sense to me, logically, than anything else.
Apollo returns to his throne and demands their worship again. And McCoy asks, like, what do we get out of this deal? And Apollo's like, well, for starters, life in paradise. And McCoy's like, oh no, we did that at least 3 episodes last season. Not
that
again.
Did not go well.
No more fucking paradise. Kirk says they're willing to talk, but he says, you'll find we don't just bow down to any creature with a bag of tricks. And Apollo continues with Greek mythology 101. He says, Agamemnon was such as you, and Hercules. Pride and arrogance. They defied me until they felt my wrath.
And Scotty's like, well, we're capable of wrath too. Scotty's getting all hot behind the ears.
Completely forgetting that their ship is like being held by the power of this creature.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Kirk tries to plead a bit. He's like, I've got 430 people on that ship up there. But Apollo is like, no, they are all mine and they will worship me too. And Palamas says, but why? What you've said so far makes no sense at all. And now suddenly Apollo notices her.
He turns on the charm, but he starts to patronize her as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, you seem wise for a woman. But then he tells her like how beautiful, and he compares her to Aphrodite and says he'll make her a goddess.
Yeah.
And Scotty is just like, okay, hands off that's my woman.
The jealous meter is on 11.
Yes, I took her for coffee, so that means she's mine.
Scotty reaches out and he opens the car door and he says,
"Hey, you, get your damn hands off."
Oh, I think you got the wrong car, McFly.
I thought you were going to do the whole, keep my woman's name out your damn mouth.
Wow.
Keep my woman's name out your damn mouth. Anyway, but so he pulls out his phaser. I'm like, Scotty, geez, he's going to shoot him. And Apollo, of course, points his finger and does a lightning bolt to Scotty's gun.
He finger bangs it.
Yeah, he finger bangs Scotty. Oh, there you go. Oh, that's perfect. He finger bangs a few more times. Scotty kind of falls back and they look at his phaser and it's all crumpled and melted. And then Chekhov had pulled his phaser too, but couldn't shoot. So they found that all the mechanics had fused together.
And Apollo goes back to hitting on Carolyn. He's like Artemis, the bow arm should be bare. And he waves his hand and suddenly she's in this beautiful pink drapey dress with her hair all piled up real high on her head.
Mm-hmm. Half naked. You got to have some half naked people in this episode.
And I think this is a sign of the times too. The way they wrote her reaction is that she's like all distracted by this pretty dress because like, oh, it's the prettiest dress. What woman wouldn't be just beside themselves over this pretty dress? Now, if it has pockets, I'm with you. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. She's so empty headed that all she cares about, I'm in a dress now. No matter that, he's shooting lightning bolts out of his fingers at her friends, at her crew.
And worse, he intends to take her away and she's perfectly fine with it. What?
Yeah, and again, maybe there's some unknown or unseen force that he has against her, but she just kind of like
it reminded me of the way they wrote Khan. Remember, and that woman that was just like, "Oh, Khan, like I'll give up everything in my career. I'll give up Starfleet. I'll give up everything because Khan."
Just because you said, and they portrayed women as just mindless. They were fine in their position on the Enterprise, like they could have been a scientist or whatever, but as soon as the man looked at him, they lost their shit.
Yeah.
They just
Before they disappear, though, Scotty makes one more valiant attempt to get his woman back, but Apollo just knocks him back again. And Apollo and Carolyn walk away from camera and fade out. Scotty has a fun line after he yells at Kirk a bit. Kirk flips over to let me talk to you like you're my friend rather than my employee mode. And he puts his hand on Scotty's shoulder and he says, besides, you stiff-necked thistlehead, you could have gotten yourself killed. So McCoy says to Kirk, Scotty doesn't believe in gods. And I wonder if this raised any hackles at all in the 60s. Like,
probably. I would imagine.
Or like, is this a sci-fi gets away with it kind of thing, right? Like, Scotty doesn't believe in gods.
But then Kirk turns around and says Apollo is no god.
Right.
So maybe he got away with it because he wasn't talking about the god that people know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how they got away with it. And so again, I'm still impressed that like Kirk comes up with this and says like he could have been taken for one once, given the primitiveness of the people 5,000 years ago. But I'm just so impressed that he finally came up with something without Spock helping him. But anyway.
So, now McCoy is starting to buy into this idea.
Back on the ship, they're still trying to break away from the green hand and like reversing polarity doesn't work. Sulu finds that it's a radiating energy pulse from the planet, but he can't pinpoint it. And so Spock suggests, well, why don't you use the process of elimination and find out where the power source isn't? Right. And then that would help you. And I think Sulu's like, the whole planet? Do you want me to do that to the whole planet?
Yeah.
The whole thing? And Spock just looked at him. He's like, okay, the whole planet. And then they're back on the planet. And I'm like, meanwhile, in the Garden of Eden, Apollo, and he's trying to romance Carolyn.
And he like name checks some of his previous lovers. Not a great look, bro.
He's totally name dropping.
Yeah. He's like, I fucked this bitch and this bitch and this bitch and this bitch.
She was a goddess, and you're going to be up there too.
None of them are as lovely as Carolyn.
Right?
Yeah, but still, come on, man.
It's exactly what it's doing.
Did you notice, this is the point in the episode when I noticed that this man's nipples were on the sides of his body?
No.
Like, they were unusually not
in the middle?
Yeah.
Symmetric? I did not notice that.
Yeah. There was a scene earlier where we saw him like from kind of the front, maybe like 20 degrees off to the right that we see him from. And I thought to myself, that man doesn't have any nipples because I couldn't see it.
All I know is he looked good. He really looked really good for that time. And yeah.
Anyway, they have a conversation here about what happened to the other gods like Artemis, Hera. And Apollo says that Earth changed. The people stopped believing in the gods, and a god cannot survive without the love and admiration and worship.
That's
interesting.
Familiar.
Yeah. And the way he talks about their leaving Earth seems to lend credence to Kirk's theory about powerful aliens. They left Earth, came home, and waited for humans to achieve space travel.
If you were gods, why couldn't you help them?
Yeah.
Why did you want to wait for them to do that?
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't. He explains how Hera was the first to go and spread herself upon the wind until only the wind remained.
So basically, did she kill herself? Because she
That's what it sounded like.
So yeah, that's what it sounded like to me. But that's kind of weak for
a god. It's
basically they're aliens.
They're aliens. Yeah.
But it's kind of weak because when nobody will worship me, I'm leaving. And is that it?
Interesting, huh? Carolyn's confused though. She's like, I don't get it. And Apollo says, I think you'd better lay down on your back because you about to get it. Oh my. And he pulls her in hard for a kiss. Cut back to the courtyard where the others are working on the puzzle. There's a fun interchange here as racist McCoy is. He gets some humor with Chekhov. They're talking about this power source, and the tricorders can detect a regular pattern of energy but can't find the source. And Chekhov says, Sir, some creatures can generate and control energy with no harm to themselves. The electric eel on Earth, the giant dry worm of Antos 4, the fluffy... And McCoy cuts him off. Not the whole encyclopedia, Chekhov.
Right. He's like, McCoy's like, so he's a little bit racist. He's like, man, Spock is contaminating that boy.
McCoy explains that Apollo seems perfectly normal, human even, except for an organ in his chest that he can't explain.
Maybe that's where his nipples went. Maybe that's why his nipples are on the side.
Just as Kirk is about to dig into that idea, Apollo returns without Carolyn. Kirk asks where she is, and when Apollo makes clear that she is no longer of any concern to them, Scotty's boner gets the best of him again.
Oh, man.
He grabs this small statuette and races toward Apollo, and of course he gets finger banged again.
He does not learn. Okay, the dude shoots lightning out of his finger.
Right?
What are you gonna do, Scotty?
Well, you know that love makes you do dumb shit.
Yeah.
Scotty's prognosis is bad too. He's suffering from severe shock now. And Kirk's pissed. He's like, you wanted worshipers? Now you've got enemies.
Yeah. And he starts going after him, not really, just verbally kind of like, okay, motherfucker. And then he finger bangs Kirk.
Yeah.
And suddenly Kirk's grabbing his throat like he's choking and his voice is gone.
Yeah, he looks like he's getting force choked by Lord Vader. Split a room. If Apollo has force choke powers, does that make Star Trek and Star Wars exist in the same universe?
Dun, dun, dun. Mind blown.
Anyway, Kirk's doing the universal sign of choking with his hand at his neck and sort of slowly collapses down onto the stairs, and it's Kirk choking to commercial. After the break, Apollo simply returns to his throne as McCoy tends to Kirk, and Apollo says, you will learn discipline. You will learn. And like before, he seems kind of tired, a little fatigued as his voice trails off and he fades away.
Yeah, no, luckily Chekhov was paying attention to that, and he lets Kirk know. He's like, hey, Captain, just before he vanishes, he seems really tired.
Yeah.
And so then I guess they've concluded that he's got some kind of, he's getting energy from somewhere, and he's got a limited reservoir of energy. So he has to retreat and recharge his, maybe that's what's in his chest is a battery. I don't know. Or a solar panel. I don't know.
We do get the starts of what becomes a fun Chekhov trope, the misappropriated Russian tales, where he believes everything was invented in Russia and all the stories came from Russia. He's like, he disappeared, Captain, like the cat in that Russian story. And Kirk's like, you mean the English story, the Cheshire cat? And Chekhov's like, Cheshire? No way. Minx, perhaps.
I didn't catch that. I remembered that conversation and I just went right past it.
Oh, so fun. Scotty is pretty fucked up, though. He's like, first I lost my middle finger in the war, and now I kind of moved my arm.
They start hatching a plan because they're like, okay, he's obviously got to retreat to recharge. So maybe we can force him somehow to expend his power and, weaken him somehow. He's expending energy by keeping up the green hand, one, and then also dealing with them on the planet. And McCoy's like, well, provoking them will get us killed. And Kirk's like, well, not all of us. I just died laughing here because, Kirk is like,
some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Kirk is like, we're going to be bait, and whoever gets killed, you get killed. If you die, you die.
Big green hand still holding onto the ship as we go back to the bridge where Uhura is soldering some circuit boards under her station. You go, Uhura. Hell yeah. Some high praise from Spock, who at first reminds her that they're on the clock. But when Uhura says that she hasn't done this kind of thing in a long time and could, fuck up the whole communication system if she doesn't take her time and do it the right way, Spock says, I can think of no one better equipped to handle it, Miss Uhura.
You know what? If that had been Kirk, he would have been like, well, get it done and yell it.
Right.
But Spock is going to give her confidence and props for what she's already capable of doing and remind her that she's very much capable. I love that about him.
But also don't let Christine hear you flirting with Uhura like that, Spock.
Yep. She will cut your fucking throat.
Spock sends Kyle down to the nuclear electronics lab with some equations to play around with. He wants to try to poke some holes in this force field, maybe shoot some phasers through those holes. And his idea to poke these holes is to generate a strong pinpoint charge of M rays on some wavelengths tied into the engines.
Where's our resident scientist? We need a scientist.
Yeah, we do.
We need an astrophysicist or something.
Back in the temple, Apollo reappears on his throne with Carolyn at his side and calls the others toward him. But Kirk and the boys ignore him for a little bit until he says, I tried to be compassionate toward your kind. And Kirk argues that they are nothing like the Earth people of 5,000 years ago. You knew our ancestors, not us. We've changed.
Yeah.
And I want to just read a part of this dialogue because there's a lot here. Apollo says, but you're of the same nature. I could sweep you out of existence with a wave of my hand and bring you back again. I can give life or death. What else does mankind demand of its gods? And Kirk says, mankind has no need for gods, which would have been great had it stopped there. But the next line is, we find the one quite adequate.
Yeah. And I think that was them correcting themselves and putting at ease those listeners who are Christian, probably.
Yeah.
Baby steps. They weren't ready to hear that.
And was that something that slipped past Gene, or was that something that the network came back and was like, you can't do all of this. We don't need God stuff.
Right. Yeah. Who knows? There could have been a whole argument behind the scenes we wouldn't be privy to. But yeah, I feel like it was kind of to placate people just in case they got angry about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Apollo demands they approach him, and the fellas all turn their backs on him.
I was loving this. I was totally loving this.
Apollo's like, I said, approach me. And Kirk says, we're busy.
Yeah, fuck you. We're busy.
Under the breath, he says, look after the girl. always calling women girls in this show.
As if they're weaker.
Yeah.
They are portrayed as weaker on this show anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Finally, Apollo demands they gather laurel leaves, kill a deer, and make sacrifices to him. And on Kirk's order, they all turn and laugh.
They were so coordinated. They turn around, they start walking toward him, laughing and poking fun at him and yelling. It was getting Apollo angry, but what they didn't plan on was Carolyn, who wasn't part of the plan. She was kind of ruining it.
Yeah.
Because as they're yelling at him, she's going to each one like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? And then Apollo's about to smite Kirk. She jumps in front of him. And she's like, a father doesn't hurt his children. How can they worship you if you hurt them?
Yeah. I had to sit in that a moment because, you know, my own Christian upbringing, right? The idea of God's punishments and all of this stuff. It's a great question. Like, how do you expect somebody to worship you? You say this is a God of love, but it sure sounds like a God of fear when you read about him.
Yeah, for sure.
And finally, she takes his hand and says, you know so much of love. Please don't hurt them. And Kirk's like, damn it, woman, we had a plan and you fucked it all up.
I know, right?
Apollo cedes for the moment, tells them he will be lenient, but the rest of the crew is to beam down. He says, make sure your artisans bring tools. You'll need homes. Like they have home builders on the Enterprise.
Yeah, no.
Okay, make sure Gary, the plumbing guy, and the AC, the HVAC
guy.
Yeah. Make sure you got them all. And Kirk's like, oh, and you will provide the herds of sheep and the pipes that will play and the simple skins we'll wear for clothes. Apollo says they will dismantle the ship for whatever supplies they need, and then he will crush its empty hull. He's been patient long enough, too patient for too long. And Apollo and Carolyn fade off again. Kirk's got one more plan, but it relies on Carolyn's loyalty. He says, if she fails us, we'd better get used to herding goats. This last scene before the commercial break, Apollo is monologuing at Carolyn about how man thinks he's progressed, but he hasn't. He's forgotten those things which gave life meaning. He says, there's an order of things in this universe. Your species has denied it. I came to restore it. As for Carolyn, she'll be the mother of a new race of gods. He says, all men will revere you almost as a god yourself. And I shall love you for time without end, worlds without end. You shall complete me and I you. And as they embrace for another kiss, I can't help but think of how fucking unprofessional and stupid this woman is acting.
Yeah.
Like the same thing with Khan, right? The way these women like just lose themselves completely over this some good looking man. And I think that happened with Khan. I think that happened on that planet with the Mall Easter Bunny.
Oh yeah, it did.
Don Juan or whatever. Falling for that princess dress nonsense.
Right. Even though he's a rapist. I
feel like that is getting really tropey in this series.
Yeah.
After the break, Kirk is trying to raise the Enterprise again, but he's still not getting through when suddenly Scotty jumps to attention as Carolyn fades back in nearby. And speaking of tropey, now Chekhov is drooling too, and he offers to go and assist, and Kirk's like, how old are you? And when Chekhov replies 22, Kirk's like, yeah, I think I better handle this. You're just a young kid. What do you know?
So young.
Carolyn is looking particularly satisfied, if you know what I mean, and she tells Kirk that she has a message for him.
Well, that would explain her quote-unquote weakened dazed state. Because, yeah.
Apollo wants us to live in peace. He wants to provide for us. He'll give us everything we ever wanted, and he can do it too. And this is where Kirk's plan begins, because in order for them to have any chance of escaping, Carolyn has to turn on Apollo. But she is hooked on that Apollo D.
It's ridiculous to me. It's like she's been brainwashed in a way.
Yeah. Kirk tells her, reject him and we'll have a chance to save ourselves. Accept him and you condemn all of us to slavery, nothing less than slavery. We might never get help this far out, or perhaps the thought of spending an eternity bending knee and tending sheep appeals to you. But like a good indoctrinated sheeple, Carolyn doesn't see this god worship as slavery at all. In fact, she says she loves Apollo.
Yeah, this whole scene, we'll talk about it at the end, but this was the scene that kind of did it for me for this.
Yeah.
So
Kirk gives a great speech here to Carolyn to kind of try to shake her loose. He says, give me your hand and feel that human flesh against human flesh. We're the same. We share the same history, the same heritage, the same lives. We're tied together beyond any untying. Man or woman, it makes no difference. We're human. We couldn't escape from each other even if we wanted to. That's how you do it, Lieutenant. By remembering who and what you are.
Remember who the fuck you are. Yeah.
And that's where your duty is. And you have to, your duty is with the rest of humanity. Right. And so she understands, but also Apollo is calling, and some sad music swells up as she walks away, off to do the thing that she doesn't want to have to do, but knows she has to do. As she walks away, she stops and turns back to look at Kirk like one last time before she turns and walks away too. So she's his words are really resonating with her.
Yeah, he's getting to her. He's used logic and trying to wake her ass up. So he reminds her one more time of her duty before she goes running back to Apollo.
Another space shot of that stupid hand. Back on the bridge, the pieces are coming together nicely now. Uhura's hot-wired comms and calls up Kirk. They're able to open small holes in the force field and shoot their phasers through them. And it turns out that the power source wasn't just nearby, it's the temple itself. And Spock suggests that Kirk and company keep a discreet distance, but we're not sure they will be able to yet. Kirk asks McCoy, hey, do you remember that extra organ in his chest that you mentioned in Act 1 that we've ignored in the entire rest of the episode? You don't think that might have something to do with his power, do you?
It's a battery.
Scotty is still worried about his boo thing and says that
she ain't thinking about him.
No, she's getting that Apollo D. Scotty says that they should wait until Carolyn comes back before blasting the temple. Blasting the Temple. That could be a good band name.
Blasting the Temple.
Yeah.
Did you have to?
I'm keeping a list.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. Oh yeah.
We need a shirt. We need a shirt or something.
Back by the pond, Apollo and Carolyn are making out again. Carolyn comes up for air and she's like, I must say, Apollo, the way you ape human behavior is remarkable.
I thought that was an interesting term.
I agree. Mimic or copy, but they went with ape. Yeah.
So major primitive there.
Yeah. But there are some things I must know, she says. Your evolutionary patterns and your social development. And Apollo's like, what?
What? He's like, what? What are you talking about? She says she's never encountered a specimen like him before, but she also kind of starts to say, I'm a scientist and I've just been merely studying you. And then she could no more love him than love a new species of bacteria.
Yeah.
And you can tell that this is hurting her to say it, but she finally realizes her responsibility to humanity. So she's asking him all these questions that he's having a hard time answering.
She starts to move away from him and he orders her to stay, but she's like, oh, is that how you control women? These thunderbolts you throw?
These finger bangs?
And she walks further away. The wind kicks up hard and we hear thunder as Apollo dramatically raises first one fist and then the other in an over-dramatic scene.
Yeah.
Back at the temple, McCoy's like, what the devil is that? Quick call from Spock, stand by on phasers. And poor Scotty is losing his mind here. He's like, we've got to go and find her. But Kirk's like, no, man, we have to stay here and wait for Apollo. Did you notice how Kirk was just casually leaning up against the column of that temple? Like,
no.
Like nothing's happening.
No, that's weird.
Uh-huh. Almost like Danny in
Grease.
Like Danny in Grease leaning up against the wall with his foot up, Yeah.
Yeah, just like, whatever's going to happen.
Or the Fonz.
Just being cool.
Yeah. The storm rages on while we cut back and forth between half-transparent and fully angry Apollo and Carolyn falling to the ground screaming. Finally, Kirk gives the order to fire on the temple. Spock warns that they're too close. So the away team hides behind some rocks nearby, these big boulders.
Still close. Still really close.
Really
right
close.
In front of the tower or whatever.
And phasers rain down on the temple. Apollo returns and tries to fight back. Carolyn reappears and Scotty runs to her. We cut back and forth quickly between the bridge where Spock keeps telling Sulu to maintain fire and the planet where the temple is now glowing. And Apollo screaming, no, and shooting finger bangs up into the air. Finally, Apollo goes silent and we see the temple transform into a pile of rubble. Did you notice how the concrete picnic table and benches in front of the temple were also destroyed?
I didn't really know.
It was framed by like two kind of column things in the foreground. And then in the middle ground, in the center, there was this like a concrete picnic table with benches. And then behind that in the background was the temple. And when the temple disappeared, the picnic table did too. And I thought that was stupid. But like, I wonder if that was that a limitation of the Visifex of the day? Like, were they not able to remove something behind something else in a layer?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Could have been. Poor Apollo. That really hurt him. The acting was actually pretty good in this particular scene where he's like crying and he's like, I would have loved you as a father loves his children, which to me, no, thank you.
No, I'm good.
But he's like, did I ask for so much?
Yes, you did.
Yes, you did. And then what Kirk says here is so perfect. It's so perfect. He's like, we've outgrown you. You asked for something that we can no longer give.
Yeah.
And Apollo's crying. Carolyn's crying. And it was just really good. Really good acting.
Until Apollo turns into a giant again. How did he turn into a giant again? They just destroyed his temple that provides him his power, right?
Yeah, apparently. Maybe he's got some residual power. I don't know. That's the thing. His battery in his chest is still charged. I don't know.
You think he runs on a 9-volt?
He runs on that smoke detector. Smoke detector batteries.
So Apollo turns into the giant again, speaks to the gods who left before him, says that they were right. There is no room for gods. Their time has passed, and he disappears one last time as Carolyn cries.
He killed himself.
Boy, I'm sure glad that's over with.
I'm happy the affair is over.
Me too.
A most annoying, emotional episode.
Yeah, but you know, I learned something today.
When dreams become more important than reality, you give up travel, building, creating.
One jealous god, if all this makes a god.
By sparing your helpless enemy who surely would have destroyed you, you demonstrated the advanced trait of mercy.
Frankly, I was rather dismayed by your use of the term half-breed. You must admit, it is an unsophisticated expression.
What did you make of this last bit of dialogue? McCoy says, I wish we hadn't had to do this. And Kirk says, so do I. They gave us so much. The Greek civilization, much of our culture and philosophy came from a worship of those beings. In a way, they began the golden age. Would it have hurt us, I wonder, just to have gathered a few laurel leaves? What do you think of that?
I think maybe that was maybe it's a way of just saying, or maybe making people think these particular gods are part of mythology. And we do have, I mean, think about it. We teach a whole fucking course on that. We learn about that in school.
Mm-hmm.
While at the same time, nobody worships them anymore.
Right.
But maybe he's just saying we should appreciate the cultural part of it, but not necessarily the literal part of it.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
it just hit me as like, because they made it very, poetic in the writing, in how he says what he says.
Maybe it didn't mean anything, but
like, would it have hurt them to have gathered some laurel leaves when this alien who was pretending to be a god commanded them to do so? Yeah, I think that would have hurt you. Yeah.
Yes, because it doesn't stop there with just fucking laurel leaves. It's your entire life. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't a big fan of that line from Kirk.
Yeah.
This episode reminded me of something Rod said on our season 1 ender. We talked about this kind of in the moment, but when he said he's interested in thinking about what we might mistake for a god. Mm-hmm. And this episode really bites into that idea in a big way. And notice that it doesn't use the Abrahamic God, right?
Yep.
Which many people actually believe in. Instead, it used the pantheon, which allows us to kind of poke at the idea of God without directly poking like Christians or Muslims or whoever in the audience, right?
Yeah.
So I really liked that. I really liked that we finally sort of took a bite into the religion apple, if it, as it were.
For me, I don't know if Gene Roddenberry had done any type of study on mental health or anything, but it seems to me that every god that we encounter, quote unquote God, I'm using air quotes,
right,
that we encounter so far in the series are all kind of narcissists. Well, not kind of, but they completely are narcissists.
Yeah.
And the definition of a narcissist, you'll find some similarities. I'm going to read you the definition that Google says. Like, narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition in which people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance. They need and seek too much attention and want people to admire them. People with this disorder may lack the ability to understand or care about the feelings of others. So I think that pretty much summed up this Apollo character. And he was like, I want what I want, and you're going to do it. And I don't really care how you feel or whether you want it or not. This is what makes me powerful, is your worship. This is what I need.
Yeah.
But a lot of the gods but I find it funny and interesting that is truly what I see as gods. They just want you to worship them.
Yeah.
That's where their power comes from. And that's what we've seen, like, in all of the episodes so far, when we've had some entity that's been claiming to be a god.
Yeah.
Do you wonder, though, are there just people that are more susceptible to narcissists than others?
Of course. And I think because I think so much of personality is that the balance of nature nurture, right? Like there are genetic components to it. And so I do think that allows for predisposition.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Just like a narcissist needs to be worshipped, and maybe there's people that need to worship someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that scene where Kirk is talking to Caroline and trying to like remind her of humanity. This scene reminded me, I feel like it's a good example of the pull of modern day religion that it has on people to where like the promise of everlasting life and stuff like that. It made her forget everything else, and she's like wanting Kirk to just, he loves you, and blah, blah,
he's
blah.
gonna provide for us,
right, and just fuck everyone else, but this is what she believes, and everyone needs to live by that type of life. And she's like, fuck what do you believe? I know he loves you. Wow. And this is what's best for you, and you need to live this way. And that's what I was, that whole conversation was like, oh my God.
You're absolutely right. What if instead she had said, I'm going to stay with Apollo, and upon that agreement, he will release you in your ship and you can go on your way?
That would have been like, fine.
Bye.
But no, she didn't do that.
No.
She was like, I'm going to impose my shit on you.
Everybody. Right.
Yeah. And that is what's happening today.
Yep.
And I think that's interesting that maybe in a way, Gene maybe kind of painted this picture, like maybe not even realize that this is what he was doing. But like, I love that people are different and they have their own like religions and stuff. And that's great. Just don't make everyone.
Right. That's great for you. And you can keep it.
I don't want to live by it.
I don't want it.
And I think that's the way it should be. But that's what it reminded me of.
Also, for me, the scene where the away team first tries to overwork Apollo and Carolyn gets in the way. Carolyn says, a father doesn't destroy his children. You said you were gentle and understanding. And that struck me as like God the Father, as in the Bible, who then also ordered, the killing of at least hundreds of thousands, according to that book.
Yeah.
And then Carolyn says, how can they worship you if you hurt them? Yeah. One of the things I think a lot of people trip on while they're breaking down their religious indoctrination. How can a God be good and yet still be responsible for such terrible things? Right. And how could you worship that God then, knowing that?
And I think people should ask those questions.
Agreed.
And not settle for, it's in the Bible,
right.
or it's this. I think people should ask those questions and demand answers that make sense in order for them to continue down that path. Unfortunately, we don't, but I just love that.
A lot of people bend themselves into pretzels, to kind of argue around it and make it work in their head.
100%.
But yeah, this episode showed it. It's that scientific skepticism that we need to look at things like this truly critically.
Yeah, 100%.
Another example of that, like the Christian connection for me, was the monologue at the end of the third act. Apollo says, "There is an order of things in the universe. Your species has denied it. I come to restore it." And that sounded a lot like Matthew 5:17 to me. "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them."
Mm-hmm.
So that reminded me of kind of a reflection. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but that read to me as very like kind of a nod back towards Christianity.
Could be, yeah.
Kirk describes a future of worshiping Apollo as slavery, which...
Thank you.
Right?
That's exactly. Mm-hmm.
Right? Again, so to the religious person in the audience, maybe you kind of think about what your religion is doing to your personal freedoms.
Right, right. And from another aspect, religion was used to excuse slavery.
Yes.
It was used, folks. When I say slavery, I'm talking about the slavery, that the one that affects me and my ancestors. So I think it's interesting that he used the word slavery because it is in a way.
Yeah. Anybody die in this episode?
Nope. Unless you count Scotty's boner for Carolyn. No.
All right. Well, then it's time to thank our wonderful patrons.
Thank you, patrons.
Thank you, patrons.
Let's get right to business.
Fine, I'm authorized to pay an equitable price. Federation has invested a great deal of money in our training. They're about due for a small return.
Listen, we pay off percentages. We're entitled to a little service for our money, huh?
Is this the way your citizens do business? Their right of petition?
They pay their percentages and the boss takes care of them.
Is there anything else?
There are a lot of great ways to help support the show here. One of the free ways to do that is to leave us a review wherever you listen to Humanist Trek. If you are listening to us on a platform that takes reviews, please go rate and review us. Give us a good 5-star rating, if you like it. Nothing below a 4 though. And write us a nice review. We would really appreciate that. That also helps people find us. And if ever one day we want to approach advertisers or networks or whatever, that kind of stuff really helps demonstrate that you're out there listening to us and that you like us and we like you. But one of the best ways to support us is to give us some of your Federation credits by becoming a patron of the show. This week, we want to welcome our newest patron, Captain Warren Stein. Thanks so much for your support, Warren.
Welcome
aboard.
Warren.
Yeah. We also want to thank our founding admirals, and I promise I'm going to get into the habit of doing this every episode. So, special thanks to our founding admirals, Russell, Ali, Peter, and Sarah. Thank you all so much. Patrons get early access to every episode, merch at various levels, and the joy of knowing that you're keeping us on the air. So head on over to patreon.com/humanisttrek. Pledge as little as $3 a month. It will really go a long way to support the production of this show.
I assume you're loitering around here to learn what efficiency rating I plan to give your cadets.
Trainees, to the briefing room. Is that all you got to say? What about my performance?
Aren't you dead?
I don't believe this was a fair test of my command abilities. There was no way to win.
There's no correct resolution. It's a test of character.
Now, what is that supposed to mean?
I am understandably curious.
May I ask you a question?
Who's been holding up the damn elevator?
Well, let's bring Becca back in now for the exciting answer to last week's Starfleet Academy Cadet Challenge, which we had to go back and listen to again because we record these so far in advance. I don't remember. And remind us all what the question is for Who Mourns for Adonias.
So what was William Shatner so insecure about during the filming of this episode?
Okay. Ali said, body image issues. They had to go shirtless or whatever, or naked, and he was worried about his image.
I couldn't remember the episode, so I thought that maybe William Shatner was naked, but actually, no, it was the other guy.
Yeah.
It was the guy playing Apollo, and he was freaking amazing. I mean, perfect. So maybe that was his body was perfection. And so maybe that was it.
My answer was maybe he had to make out with some woman and was concerned about his breath, which I now realize is not right.
Okay.
All right. What's the answer?
Well, Sarah, you're wrong. And Allie was very much closer to home and actually said height. You listed off a bunch of different physical attributes. So I'm going to give you a half a point for that because you weren't like solid on that, but you did say it. So, but he was so concerned with the height disparity that he disallowed any shots which would show him and the much taller Michael Forrest side by side in the same frame. According to Forrest, whenever Shatner would speak to him, Forrest would notice Shatner inadvertently standing on his tippy toes.
What?
No.
Oh, come on, Bill.
Oh, I believe it though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. That's that Hollywood vanity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we got an email from Karen. Do you know who that is?
If it's who I think it is, I might have met her on the cruise.
Okay, cool. All right. Karen says, who mourns for Adonias? Was Kirk worried about the length of his outfit? Too short? Love this podcast. I think we should give Karen half a point too, because
Yay, Karen!
The length was, he was worried about. It's adjacent. Let's give Karen half a point.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks for the email, Karen. And of course, we'll tell you how to play along in a moment. But first, next week, we'll be reviewing The Changeling, Season 2, Episode 3. The Enterprise encounters a probe named Nomad. Do you remember anything about this? I remember the probe named Nomad.
I never say yes when you ask me.
But I don't. But I remember there was a probe named Nomad. I remember that, like this little robot-y thing that floats or whatever.
Was it like beady from?
But a changeling, that I don't connect.
Yeah, because we know a changeling is a shapeshifter,
right?
So I don't know. I don't remember a single thing.
Well, Deep Space Nine ruined my ability to think of anything as a changeling other than the way the founders were presented or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And all you see is a bucket.
Yeah. Okay, what's our question for the changeling?
Nichelle Nichols got into a dispute with director Mark Daniels during filming. Ultimately, Gene sided with Nichols and changes were made to the script. What was the dispute about?
Shit.
Oh, that was a good one. Sided with her. What would she not want to happen in the script? Maybe they want to slap her around again or something. I don't, you know what I mean? Because I'm sure she got sick of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what it was. I'll say, maybe some violence against Uhura's character.
I don't know. They wanted to show her in a negative light in some way. Wanted to have her do something that just wouldn't be within her character.
Mm-hmm.
Is that specific enough? All right, well, we've locked in our answers if you want to play along.
Okay. She's not saying shit.
Head to your nearest social media and share out your answer. #Starfleet Challenge, and we'll see.
Sorry, am I too quiet over here?
Nope, that's great. Next time on Humanist Trek, Season 2, Episode 3, The Changeling.
Live long and prosper.
Qapla'.
Humanist Trek is available wherever you replicate your podcasts. Follow us on all the social medias at Humanist Trek. Become a patron at patreon.com/humanisttrek. Open hailing frequencies to podcast@humanisttrek.com and visit our website, humanisttrek.com. Humanist Trek is a production of Sarah Austin Media.